What is up, everybody? This is a long overdue Cult of Cat episode, and in this episode, I'm going to talk about what happened yesterday, which was very spiritual in a lot of ways, and it also has a lot to do with what I talked about in the last episode with coincidences and how when you're on this path, this vibration, coincidences show up. And what happened last night, Cat? Well, I ate a bunch of mushrooms. So let's give you a little bit. Yes, I ate mushrooms and I was in the woods. So let me give you, and we're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about this insane mushroom trip in the woods with two other guys. Okay, so one who I never met up until that point, by the way. So let's give you some context. Let's go back a little bit. So last week, and I'm not going to drink wine on this episode. I did buy wine, but we'll save it for the next episode because, you know, I feel good. I'm still kind of vibing high. Well, I am vibing high off of yesterday's trip. And there's a lot of takeaways to this, but I want to share the whole story with you. So this is going to be a great, just sit down and listen to episode. I mean, that's what these are. But so last week, I had went to this NLP hypno retreat thing, okay? So this was just south of the city, and it was on this beautiful land with this house, and there was like, these girls were hosting it. The witches I talked about in that last episode that I showed previously. These witch chicks, they're not really witches, but they were hosting this NLP thing where, you know, you get certified, and I got certified in hypnotherapy as well as being an NLP practitioner and all that. So it was a very small, it was an all-day thing. It was a sort of it was a classroom environment, but there was only a few students in it. There was about 8 of us in this thing, and then there was two teachers and a teacher assistant hosting it. So it was very small, intimate, and we were practicing all this stuff on each other. And I would say this would probably be a good episode in its own. I don't want to go too deep into it, but it was it was insane because we were releasing a lot of, like, there was emotions in this. Like, we were releasing like trapped emotions. They were sharing techniques how to release trapped emotions, going through your timeline in almost this like meditative way called quantum timeline therapy, and going back into your life or a past life or whatever and just clearing out anger, fear, guilt, stuff like that. There was more to it than just that, but that was just an example of one thing we did. And we were all crying. Like, we had these profound experiences. There's another thing called parts integration, and I'm sure you guys could look this up on YouTube, where you feel conflicted. Part of you feels this way, part of you feels that way. And what you do is somebody guides you through this thing, and you bring the two opposing parts together because your two opposing parts, turns out they generally want the same thing. And then you bring the two parts together and you do this thing. And this is an experience, by the way. I'm never going to be able to explain it the way I want to without like demoing it on somebody. But when I did my parts integration, I just I felt like I was getting hit with like electricity, and I started crying. Like, it was just profound. So the point of me telling you this is, we were all facilitating this stuff on each other, and we were also receiving it. So, because I'm certified now to do this on other people, or help them, I should say, which I'm going to be doing with traders from the other channel, the Fat Cats of Wall Street channel, because I think bringing this stuff in the trading is going to be fantastic. But since it became an intimate environment, I met some guy there named Mason, and coming near the end of it, I was hearing, the teachers of the class, they were telling us how people integrate these teachings with psychedelics. And I'm like, wow, I could see how powerful this could be. Like, for me, psychedelics has always been an extremely spiritual thing. It's not something, I mean, it's great fun, don't get me wrong. But for me, it's eating mushrooms, and I rarely do it, maybe once every few years. I'd like to do it twice a year. But the thing is, I'm never seeking. They just seem to show up coincidentally at the right time. So interesting thing is I had bought some mushrooms some time ago with the intentions of doing it with my previous girlfriend, my ex-girlfriend. And we microdosed it, and she didn't seem to be into it. She didn't want to do it. She just went to sleep. So I'm sitting on these mushrooms, and I'm like, man, I don't really like tripping by myself. And I was considering giving most of it away to somebody else that's seeking mushrooms, because I just feel that's what they're for, because in my opinion, it is medicine in a lot of ways. Can it be abused? Yes, I think it can, like anything else, but nonetheless, it is spiritual medicine, especially for myself. So I have these mushrooms, right? They've been in the freezer forever. And this gentleman named Mason, I'm like, hey man, because I heard him talking about tripping and stuff. I'm like, I would love to do mushrooms, and maybe we can practice this stuff on each other. And he goes, yeah, that would be great. We could go to a park or something. Okay. And didn't think nothing of it after that, right? A week goes by, we're all in this kind of group Telegram, all of the students and stuff. And we really bonded. Like, these are people who, like, I think going through something like this, because most people live in this bubble, these bubbles. But to just, like, be completely vulnerable with others and just to let go and just let these emotions flow out is so profoundly beautiful. And so we have, like, I keep saying it over and over, but we had this strong bond with each other. And we still do. And a week goes by, and it's Memorial Weekend. Just the other day, yesterday was Memorial Day, actually, on the day of filming this. So I had left town. I went all the way to Houston, which is about 3 hours away. Go see my mom, and help her out because she's having computer issues. I fixed her computer. Needed to get a birth certificate because I'm gonna get a passport and go to Costa Rica with these people in December, which that should be great. A great story for this channel. So it's Sunday night. Mason sends me a voice message, and he goes, hey, Fat Cat, do you remember how we talked about doing mushrooms? He's like, well, coincidentally enough, one of my good friends just asked me if I wanted to do mushrooms on Monday in a park. And he says, we talked about it. Do you want to go with us? I'm like, yeah, fuck yeah. I said, hell yeah. And so I just packed up and left Houston. I was going to stay that. I got home at like 2 in the morning. I'm like, fuck that. And we was to meet at like 2 p.m. or some shit to do this. And come into town, I coffee grind my mushrooms. I'm like, hey man, do you need mushrooms? He's like, no, we got some, but we're willing to share. And I'm like, it's all good. So I coffee grind mine, and it's a strain called Tidal Wave, by the way, for those of you who are interested, because they hit like a tidal wave, very strong stuff compared to what I've had in the past. A little goes a long way. So I coffee grind. What I like to do is, because it fucking tastes horrible. Let's not shit ourselves. If you enjoy the taste of mushrooms, you are a sick fuck. But, or you're a very strong individual. So I coffee grind them, and then I take like empty capsules and just pack them tight. So I have about 1.5 grams of these and 3 capsules, big capsules, packed tight as shit. So I take them over there, And what's interesting about this is like they decide to brew a tea with theirs, and it's a different strain. So typically when you're tripping with other people, you're all on the same strain. So for me, I'm like, this is going to be interesting because I know the tea might kick in sooner than me eating these, but we'll see what happens. So I go over to Mason's buddy's house, Nathan, who's to go trip with us, who I've never met in my life. And I only knew Mason from the NLP getaway from the prior week. But him and I, he had a profound experience, like a breakthrough experience with his father, who's passed away. And it reminded me of an experience. It really reminded me of my relationship with my biological father, who also has passed away. Interestingly enough, there was 3 men, myself, Mason, and another gentleman named Austin there, and all 3 of us, our dads have passed away. So just weird how that stuff kind of sets up. Also weird how this whole mushroom experience set up relatively quickly too. So I meet this guy named Nathan. I never met him in my life. Barely, I know Mason, but barely, you know what I mean? Still. And more so in a classroom environment, but I still like feel him here, like a strong bond. And this Nathan guy is just completely open, just like talking to me like we've been good friends forever, which is great. But my intention going into this is like, this is going to be good anyways. Like I had no animosity of tripping with a stranger, because typically when you trip with people, you feed off their energies, and it can be intense. But this ain't my first rodeo. Fat Cat's done plenty of mushroom trips and other psychedelics. Never done acid in my life, but I've experienced with DMT and salvia when it was legal, way back in the day. But it's not my first rodeo. I know how to handle myself in trips, especially trips where you feel like you're dying. Which those, I don't want to do that. I didn't want to do that trip. Hence the dosage. None of us really wanted to get that fucked up, but we wanted to definitely have a nice, good trip. And that was the intentions from all of us going in. And this Nathan guy's just so nice. I'm like, this is going to be good. I knew it was going to be good. This is going to be good. This is going to be great. I know it's going to be good before I even met the guy, and we're just all vibing. And it's 3 of us. I love the number 3. 3s is so good. Like 3s is good, especially like for me spiritually, like just 3. And there's 3 of us going into this woods, ironically enough. So Mason's like, hey, do you guys want to set, some intentions going into this? And, for Mason, I don't remember quite what he said, but it was, he wanted like just a refresher, I believe. Can't quite remember what Nathan wanted, but for me, I'm like, I want a paradigm shift. I want a slight paradigm shift, and I got it. And you guys will see as this story unfolds, because it's fucking beautiful. So I wanted a slight paradigm shift. And they're like, what do you mean by that? I'm like, I want this trip, I just want to have fun. I just want to have fucking fun. But I want it to be so good that my life shifts just slightly because of this trip. And then I also said, I also want to see, like, I love animals. I'm like, I want to see some cool animals. And guys, this shit's going to get fucking nuts, okay? Just stay with me here. This shit is going to get nuts because the animals. Oh. But anyways, just remember this point in this story. I'm like, I want to see. He goes, cool animals, huh? I'm like, yeah, I just want it, like, just some like animal experience where I'm like, whoa. That's what I want. And we got a lot of that. Okay. So Nathan, or Nathan, I should say. Nathan had a roommate named Zach, and Zach never really tripped much, and we invited him to go. He didn't want to go. Seemed nervous about tripping. But what was interesting is he was in his room, and he comes out, and he's like, oh my God. He's like, I was scrolling on Facebook, and I heard you, Fat Cat, say paradigm shift. And then I just read a message from my friend's mom who was talking about paradigm shifts. Literally, this happened like within 10 minutes of me saying paradigm shift. There's your coincidences. There's your synchronicities. And again, I've talked about it in that last episode. I'm going to pop it back up. I'm sure you've all seen it. But that episode is important in a lot of ways because these synchronicities is huge. It just, when you're on this vibration of just letting go and just flowing with life, same thing in your trading and just flowing through the markets. For those of you who aren't aware, a lot of people here are traders. It's magic. It's fucking magic. Okay, so there's this park down the road, and it's 300 acres. Like, it's not just a park, like a fields and a playground. It's got a shitload of trails. Rivers are running through it. This is 300 acres of just this massive nature area. A lot, untouched other than the trails and the initial parking area. So it was literally right down the road from Nathan's house. So we all dose up, we cheers each other. And, we pack up our backpacks. I brought a backpack, and what I did was, I packed this little radio. I'm like, I'm going to bring some entertainment, but most importantly, I packed my Tibetan singing bowls. I'm like, I love these things because I use them in meditations. There's the little one. This one I actually is real special to me. I bought in a really tough spot of my life. So this one means a lot to me. Very hypnotic. So I'm like, I'm going to bring that stuff and, a bunch of water. It's Texas. It's hot. And then, they're packing shit too. We all got backpacks. And we're just, we've all tripped before. So, we're just shoving what we think we're going to need in these things. So we go out, we drive there, and it was literally like an 8-minute drive down the road. And Nathan's lived in this house for like a year, and he didn't realize this park was down the road. So we park, and we go into, we get on a trail, and we're going in, and we had like dosed up before we left. So we're going into the woods. And it's almost like we're kind of rushing to get to wherever. We don't know exactly where we're going. We want to be near the water or whatever, part of the river. So we're just going into this thing real deep. And there's so many paths that go every which way going into this thing. So we go in, and then we finally find our first little riverbank. They're starting to trip pretty hard, and we all sit down and look at it. I'm feeling good at this point, and since I ate it and it was in capsules, it's taking me a little bit longer, but I'm starting to feel good. So we're just chilling there, and we're all spread out side by side, just looking at the water, just chilling. And then we're like, hey, do you guys want to, move further down? What was weird is like this entire trip, we were just almost in complete agreement. I mean, we were, and how we moved and navigated through these woods. It was never one person's decision. If somebody had a whim, we went a specific way. So Mason's like, let's go this way. So we go to the left, and he goes, wait, I feel like we should go back and go the other way. Because what him and I learned a lot in that hypnosis and LP training was trusting the unconscious mind. Whatever happens in the unconscious mind, you should just go with it on a whim. Trust the unconscious mind. I kept doing that to him. Because that's kind of how we talked. We use like hypnotic language, which can be deep and slow. Trust the unconscious mind. I kept doing that to him. So we go back. And I also felt going back was good. And we're going along the riverbank. And there were some people fishing. And they're like, let's. They were kind of nervous about being around other people. For me, personally, I didn't give a shit. So they're like, let's go up the trail a little bit, like off the riverbank. So we're walking. Then we find another beautiful area on the riverbank. But for me, it didn't just quite feel right. And we're sitting here staring at it. And at this point, I'm starting to pet the bark on a tree because it feels good. And we're just staring at this water, and it's sort of just doing this, and it's got all this like grains of leaves on top of it. Like not quite leaves, it looks like wheat almost. Just like this white shit that was floating on top, and the water was just doing this. And we couldn't tell if it was flowing or not. And I'm like petting this tree, and they're tripping hard, and I'm still building up here. And I'm like, hey guys, I think we should keep going. So we're following Mason, and then we're going through the woods, and I see through the woods like all this white, and it's like, okay, there's a rock face here. But instead of going there, Mason's like, we should go down this way. So we start cutting off the trail in the woods. And then they stop, and I hear water, like trickling, like somebody left a sink on. I'm like, okay, there's running water down here. That's good, because we knew there was a waterfall around there. And this is, you know, it's not that impressive of a waterfall in Texas. I mean, there's some good ones, but we knew there was a waterfall in this park somewhere, and we didn't know if it was it or not. So I went down the scout, and I'm starting to see all these rock faces and shit. And then I come out of the woods, and I'm like, oh my god, guys, this is it. This is the ticket. This is it. And it just opened up into this, like, there was this massive boulder off to my right. Like, just this big-ass boulder. And then below the boulder was, like, all this water. And then these very small waterfalls. They were about this tall. Coming off these rock faces. Just real small, streaming through, trickling. Beautiful moss underneath the waterfall. Because the waterfall cuts in under. Because rushing water carved under this rock. And then there was giant pieces of rock as soon as I come out, you know, like that fell off of a cliff face somewhere. And then it opened up, and off to the left, it kind of like opened up. It looked like a little lake almost, but it was real, you know, it wasn't super big, but it was pretty decent size. And then at the other end was like a bunch of boulders, almost in a circle, like Stonehenge. And then I went down there to go scout that area out, and then it choked, and then the water came through this narrow choke point, which ran further down. But the choke point was so covered in foliage, and what was on the other side of it wasn't worth a shit. And then to the right, where the big rock boulder was, like, I mean big. Like, this thing is the size of, like, a VW bus or something. And just massive. Off to the right, the woods started to close up as well. So it was like this really large opening. Really good size opening just in the middle of the woods. And it's like the river choked, and it just opened up vastly. And it wasn't like flowing hard. Like, you could walk through it, no problem, everywhere in this location. And then it choked back up. So it was like this opening. I'm like, this is it. This is it. This is where we're going to fucking trip. This is it. This is where we're gonna hang out. So we're all just walking around. We're like, whoa, whoa. And you know what I mean? And then we all climb on top of this big rock. And Nathan's like, should we set up camp here? I'm like, yeah, let's set up camp here. So we set up camp. We're unpacking everything. And then, you know, we're just sitting there chilling. And it's starting to kick in. And it's just so beautiful. The sound of the water just sort of trickling off to the side. I pull out the bowls. And then I start teaching them how to use it and stuff. Because it does take a little... It takes a little skill to, like, know how to finesse it. And when you're pushing on it, you got to push on the rim. And you got to, like, counterbalance with this hand because you're always pushing towards the center. So I'm teaching them how to do it. You know, you can't really do that with the little one. You know, you can't really do it with the little one. So they're playing with it, and we're starting to trip, and it just sounds good. I've not, like, really heard these things in person on a mushroom trip, because I haven't had, like, a good mushroom trip in a long time, and I usually do it indoors. I've been outside on mushrooms, but to have a full-on nature experience, this is my first time. So, you know, it just sounds good, it feels good, and we're just like, and Nathan brought an umbrella in case the sun would cook us, you know, and Mason, surprisingly enough, brought a shitload of food. He had like walnuts and blueberries, just brain foods, and you know, it's funny because in the NLP thing, he was like, "Hey, do you want a blueberry?" And he would keep doing it, and Nathan's like, "Yeah, Mason always asks me if I want a bloob." And Nathan calls them bloobs, and he's like, hell yeah, I want a bloob. And Mason's like, yeah, I love bringing food and sharing it. And it's like, we all kind of like, we're bringing something different to this trip. Like, I brought entertainment, essentially, with these and the radio, which we didn't listen to until near the end, but like, it was like, good. Like, Nathan brought this giant like blanket and shit for, you know, for them to lay on or what have you. I was just laying on this rock, this giant rock, because it felt good, you know what I mean? And we're all just having a good fucking time. And then this fucking blue jet, like a jetliner, is just flying, and Mason's like, look at that jet. And I go, it looks like a fucking sky whale. And they just started busting out laughing. But to me, in that moment, it looked like a giant whale flying in the sky. And it was like blue on top with a white belly. So it had like the color scheme of a whale. And every time a jet flew over, we would go, sky whale! So things start to get primal from this point. So we're just kind of exploring this area. And I'm like in the water. I'm like, oh my god, the water feels good. So I'm like kind of laying in it. And it's very shallow in a lot of areas. And I go to where the waterfall is and I look under there because the moss felt real good. It was like very lush and green moss growing underneath this little rock face. So I like look under there like, what the fuck's under here? You know what I mean? And it was like nothing but frogs. And they were just tucked up in the moss, up in the rock face. I'm like, holy shit, guys, there's frogs! And Nathan is standing on the rock face, real high, just playing this, and he goes, no way, dude. I don't believe you. He goes, I need a second verification. He goes, Mason, are there frogs in there? And Mason comes in, he goes, yeah, there's frogs under here. And it just like little toads. And then we start to look around and there are tadpoles everywhere in this area. Like everywhere. And I'm just trudging through this shit. And there was this like green algae shit real thick. And I just stepped through it and just tadpoles come flying out everywhere. And I felt bad because I guess these things live under that thick algae. It's a good place for them to like hide. And I literally crushed the roof of their house, essentially. And then there was another area where it was like lighter patches of this algae where it wasn't so thick on the other side of this water area. And they were all under there. And Mason's like, wow, dude, it's like a town. It's like a city. And they're living under all this. I go, yeah, it's like more dense over there. That's like the actual city. And this is the suburbs for the frogs. I go, we're in the frog kingdom, boys. And then fucking Nathan's way up on that rock still playing this. And he goes, Frog Kingdom! And, you know, we're tripping at this point. And we're not wearing, like, me and Mason aren't wearing shirts at this point. And Nathan's wearing a green, which just is like frog, you know. A green, like, sleeveless muscle shirt. And he has, like, a shirt, like a red shirt tied around his neck. And it's backwards like a fucking cape. And it was like deja vu almost. Like I've seen this before. Like like the picture. I swear this would be a great picture of him just standing there like this with like this cape almost on a rock real high up. Mason is like squatted slightly in front of me and I'm looking under stuff. Like what's in this fucking hole? And it looked like the evolution of the caveman into a normal human where, you know, that picture where it's like hunched over and then it's progressively standing up. You guys have seen that picture before. That's what it looked like with how we were. And Mason's like, we're like cavemen. And I go, ah, ah, ah! And then he's like, ah, ah, ah! And we started screaming and shit. You know what I mean? And, just fucking getting primal. This trip starts to get incredibly primal. Like it starts to get more wild because we're just letting go and just letting like instincts almost kick in. So we're all fucking around in here for a while, like hours. And then I go off on my own for a moment to the front where that Stonehenge rock formation was. And I'm sitting on this rock and I notice there's big fish, like about that big, which is big for this kind of river. And they're trapped. Like the way the river is choked, there needs to be a hard rain for them to get elsewhere, but they're kind of like trapped in this area. And they kept hiding under some of these rocks. So I wanted to go sit there and like look at them. And I'm just sitting on this rock. And I don't hear anything. Like Mason and Nathan's energy is way, way, way back there. And all of a sudden, just hearing the animals and the river and just looking at the water looked like it was vibrating. And we were definitely having visuals. I was having visuals. Like when we were in here, at this point, I'm like full on tripping. And I just felt like I was resonating vibrationally with nature. Like, I could just feel nature, like, vibrating, like, oh. And I was in tune with it, and I just could feel it in my body, like, oh. Like, I was synced up with the vibration of nature. And it was so interesting because it had to be quiet for me to feel it. And I'm like, I fucking get it at this point. Like, I had this moment in my thoughts where I'm like, the universe really is vibrational. And all my beliefs in syncing up vibrationally, I know is real, but this is like confirmation on another level. And the trip only gets crazier. So Nate comes down and he's starting to play this right over the little frog waterfall. Because what was interesting is they're all tadpoles and then they turn into little frogs and they start crawling up into the mossy area. So it's like they have their little city, their little suburbs, and then they just millions of these things. And then they crawl up and start evolving and then they crawl up. That's funny, actually, ironically, because I just talked about the caveman, the evolution of caveman, and now I'm just having a moment just now, like epiphany. That I just mentioned earlier in the story about how we look like a caveman standing up over time. Same thing with the frogs. They're evolving up. Interesting. And they go up higher, too. So he's standing right above the little waterfall area playing this. And then Mason's below the giant rock face on a smaller rock, just sitting lotus position with his palms up. And he's like, oh. And I'm just like in trance. And I'm just standing there, just watching. Because I'm just feeling good. We're just feeling good, vibing. And this lady walks through and they get nervous. And I look at Nathan and he stops playing a bowl and I go, keep playing, trip like nobody's watching. Because that's the way I see it, is live life like nobody's watching. Kind of like I do this channel, I just cut loose and don't care. Because you're probably never going to see these people ever again. Who cares what they think? And when you're living and you're just letting go and you don't care how you look, that is very attractive and it attracts. Sure, some people get weirded out, but fuck them. But when you're vibing at such a high level, it attracts people. It attracts specific people to you. And those are the people you want in your life, and it attracts more people into your life, actually. So, this lady comes through with her dog. You know, we did really not much traffic going through there. Just earlier in the trip, there was a guy and his kid that were fishing we saw on the bank earlier as we were going here. And they got nervous when they went through, and I just made eye contact. And I'm like, hey, and they just walked by. So this lady comes through, and she seems a little nervous because we're barely clothed, and we're banging on bowls, and Mason's like, oh, and I'm like this, and I'm wearing these yellow shaded sunglasses, like Fear and Loathing in Vegas, you know, that movie. And she walks by, I'm like, howdy, and she's like, hey. And then she just like nervously walks through there. Because we're the crazies. We're three dudes and we're the crazies. But you know, it was what it was. And that was the only traffic that had passed through there. And we were there for hours. And we're just feeling good. And then we're like then we all go up on the rock again and we're laying there. And I'm just staring at the clouds. And this giant dark cloud comes by and you could just feel the weather shift, like this cool air, and the clouds were just like, oh, the way they were breathing, the sky was breathing, was just so beautiful. So it's starting, the sunlight is shifting. We started the trip later in the day. You know, we got there at like 3:34 maybe p.m. So I'm like, you know, we all come to an agreement that we should move. Mason's like, hey, you guys want to go throw a frisbee in a field? And we're like, yeah, let's go throw a frisbee in a field. Fuck it. Let's move camp. And I'm like, you know, we're like, we love you, Frog Kingdom, because that's what we named this area, because it literally was the Frog Kingdom. So we're all fucking stoked to the tits. So I start walking out. And then it's funny because like Mason is trying to not go through the water again. He's trying to, and it's so shallow. It's like, you know, there's just enough water that your shoe might get soaked, but you know, you got to step carefully. And I'm wearing shoes and I'm like, he's like hesitating to get across this wet area. So I literally go get a stone and I walk right up to him and my feet aren't getting wet and I place it down for him to step on. Even though he could have just walked where I walked and his feet would have never got wet, but they for some reason had to use the stone and I just brought it and placed it. It's fucking stupid. Absolutely retarded. And then Mason decides to barefoot it through the woods and I barefoot hike all the time. So I'm like, fuck it. I'm taking off my shoes too. So we was going to go back the way we came from, but then Nathan stops and he looks, and we were at this original area where we saw the white rock faces before we went into the Frog Kingdom. And it's like we're on this giant rock with all these holes in it because the water was swirling and carving it everywhere. Just all these holes, this giant solid bed of rock. Just unique to this specific area with all these holes. And Nate's just standing there and he's just hands to his side, just staring at it. So Mason's wanting to go the other way, but then I go to Nate. And he goes, Nathan's like, I feel like we should go this way. I feel like there's something over there. So we start going that way, and then it just opens up into this clearing. And then there's this like small man-made dam. And it's literally just like concrete, like a concrete retaining wall. That's it. And it was retaining most of this river. It didn't have floodgates on it or anything like that. It was like this retention wall almost to hold most of this water up back there. And there was some people fishing, and they were nervous. They're like, oh, people are fishing. And I just ran up there. I didn't give a fuck. And I'm looking into this like dam. I'm like, whoa. And then they come up behind me, and we're like, we should go this way. And well, fuck it. Let's just keep going. Let's see where it goes. You guys want to see where it goes? Everybody's like, yeah, let's just keep going. You know? And I'm like, there's more treasures to be had out here that we've not discovered. Just trust the trip. So we continue on these paths, and we're just on this beautiful dirt path. And it's like with just this lush, tall grass with these beautiful Indian paintbrush flowers, and the bluebonnets are starting to turn purple in the season. If you're not familiar with what a bluebonnet is, it is the state flower in Texas, and they turn purple when they start dying. And just tall, like, brown grass. And we're going through the woods into these fields, and the path is just dirt, and it has, like, all these cracks in it, and it looks like scales. So when I'm looking at it, like, the scales are opening and closing, and it feels good on the feet because it's just solid dirt, barefoot in it. And we're just having a good fucking time. Just walking through the woods. And then, what I do is I get out the little radio, I pull this out, and Nathan puts on these amazing tunes. Like, I can't even tell you what songs they are, but they were like had this almost country twang, but it wasn't quite country music. It was just this great tripping music, and Nathan was crushing it in the music selection, and he's just, he's playing it on his phone, and I'm holding this shit, and we're just like going through the woods and stuff. And then we kept coming into paths, and they're like, we're still like on this like wavelength of trying to go play frisbee in a field. And then we get to a fork in the road, and I go, holy fuck. They're like, where should we go? I'm like, holy shit, this is a decision. This is literally a decision. And we're looking, and one side's real dark, and the other side's real light, because the sun's starting to kind of set a bit. And Nathan's like, well, that path looks more light. And Mason's like, but there's the dark path. And I go, this is like those fucking movies. You think that's the better path, but it's not. This could be a trick. And we're trying to decide on it. And Mason's like, we should just vote. There's 3 of us. I go, no. Let's throw a shoe up in the air. So we take his sandal and throw it up in the air. And if it landed right side up, we went to the left. If it landed upside down, we go to the dark path. It lands upside down. So we go to the dark path. So we're just having a good fucking time. And the grass and everything, and it's just like it's like trees, then it opens up into these fields, and there's no people. We are literally have not seen anybody since the fishermen on the dam. Literally nobody for the rest of this trip. Well, I take that back. So, and I'm like, this is beautiful, and I'm just feeling good. And then we're walking, having a good time, and then Mason's like, I'm gonna run, and we just all start running on the path and shit, and through the woods, and just, we're running, and it just feels so good to run. And then, you know, we're looking over this rock face, and there's this huge, like, we see this, like, area off to the right in the woods, and it goes down, and it goes down in this massive valley, and this is where part of the river was running, but we're like further downstream on it or somewhere. I don't even know. We just going in all sorts of different directions. So we're looking at it, and I'm like, wow, that looks cool, but I definitely don't want to climb down there. Man, they're like, yeah, fuck that. So we keep going down the path, and all of a sudden I see this thing off to the right where it has these weird rock faces. And I'm like, holy shit, a waterfall ran through it. And it was like just this like almost mountainous rock looking shit. And it was carved out in like a circular fashion, and then it dumped down. And I run down it. And then it dumps down a little bit, like only a couple of feet. And then it carved out a big flat section, almost like a circular shape. And then it dumped down again a couple of feet. And then it carved out another big chunk. And I'm just running down this. I'm like, oh my God, this is going to get us in that valley. And it was almost like stairs, like natural stairs, where the water had carved out this big circular section, dumped down a little bit, carved out another big circular section, dumped down a little bit. And we're just running down it. And it's starting to get dark, but fuck it. We're just letting the unconscious mind lead us to wherever we go, just wandering around aimlessly. So we come down this shit, and then it opens up into the valley. And then I thought maybe we were just going to look in there, and it was cool. It was a different biome almost. And then off to the right, Mason's like, I got to go, or not Mason, Nathan's like, I got to go check it out. So we just start running down there. And then it was like this heavily wooded area to the left, but it was like different foliage. It looked like a jungle. And there was this cool tree that just was sideways. And Nathan's like, Fat Cat, I think you should sit on it. And I sit on it, and I goes, oh my God, it just contours the ass. Like, and I'm just laying in this tree. And then Mason goes further down. And then it almost just like dead ends. Because the water gets real deep. I'm like, well, shit, should we take a break here? So, you know, Mason wants to eat a little food. So he breaks out the food, and then we can see there's a bunch of foliage to our right, but behind it we can see like very interesting rock formations. And this one rock, this boulder like had collapsed, but it was like wedged in between other rock faces. And the way it was shaped is it looked like that ledge from Lion King when Simba's being held up, you know, and you guys know what I'm talking about. That's how it was shaped and how it was overhanging. So Nathan's like, I need to go climb that. I gotta go climb that. So we backtrack a little bit, and we tell Mason we'll be right back. So we go around this overgrowth, and then we get up on the rock face, and we're standing up there, and we can see Mason all kind of down a little bit, and he's waving at us, and we're waving at him. And then I go to the other side, and like Mason's like here, the rock face is here, and then I go all the way to the other side where the river cuts off where Mason is sitting, because it's real deep right there, and I get to the other side of the bank from him, so I can see like Nathan on top of the rock face and Mason sitting there eating, and we can just all three see each other, and we're like spread out like this triangular formation, which is kind of cool. And then Nathan's like, I want the bowl. I wish I had the bowl. I'm like, I'll go get it for you. So I just fucking haul ass and run all the way back around, and they're laughing and shit, but I don't give a fuck. And I grab the bowls and shit, and I run back to him. And then he's like, thanks, man. Thanks. I appreciate it. And then he's banging on it. And then I grab the little one, and I go back to my original location across from where Mason was sitting, and I'm hitting the little one, and we're like, and we're all just tuning up, hitting the stuff. So what happens next is like, I start trudging through the water a little bit, because I found out that there were areas I could walk before it dropped off real deep. And it wasn't super deep, but it was deep enough that I didn't want to go that deep. And Mason's like, hey, man, there's a place over there where we came from that has a lot of, like, it smells good. He's like, I'm going to go sit there. I'm like, you want us to go with you? And he's like, no, you guys just take your time. So he goes back. And then I go up to Nathan and we're fucking with the bulls. And he's like, man, I have a weed pen. I need to hit this. He's like, I want to hit this. So he takes a rip of it. I take a rip of it. I'm coughing my brains out. And we're just chilling. And we're just relaxing and shit. Bullshitting. And then, it's starting to get darker. And it's like, you know, I tell Nate, I'm like, hey, man, I think we should probably go back to Mason. And he's like, yeah. And he's like, I'm not good with directions. I'm like, don't worry, I can smell our way out of this shit. So, all of a sudden, this red cardinal flies by. I'm like, look, that red cardinal. And he's like, yeah. And it flew in the direction Mason was. And I'm like, I think now's the time. Nathan I'm like, you want to keep the singing bowl? And he's like, yeah. So we're walking and I'm like, bang it so Mason can hear us. And we walk and we don't see him. And he goes, hello, brothers. And he's like literally sitting on that waterfall downstep area. And this is when things get really nuts. Mason's just sitting there and he's like, it smells good over here. And I didn't realize nature put off like these very beautiful like aromas. So we're just sitting there and, you know, I get out the big bowl because Nate had the little one when we were traveling. I get the big one out for him. And he's just banging it, playing it. And he's like addicted to it. He's like, dude, this was the best thing ever. You brought it. And he was just really vibing with this one. He loved it. So he's banging on it. And we're sitting there and like behind us is, you know, I told you it was like almost like a half circle cutout because of how the water came down. I'm like, hey, face the bowl into the rock face and hit it. And maybe we can hear it. Like it'll amplify like a theater. And, you know, it's kind of like refracting. Mason's like, can I touch your head, fat cat? I go, yeah. And then Nate's behind him. And again, it's like I'm real low. Mason's a little higher. And then Nate's like always on something at a higher pitch. Same thing with that like Lion King mountain. We were all kind of like up. And I go, Nathan, hit the bowl, hold it, and touch Mason's head, and it'll touch my head, and I wonder if I can feel it. You know, we're still tripping, so he hits it, and it's like you could feel almost a vibration traveling through us, and it was amazing. Oh, and then we're sitting there. We were sitting there, and all of a sudden, we heard almost like if you light a firework, that spark sound, we heard it sounded just like that. Like almost like a fireball was casted through the sky. Like a really loud right above us. And there's trees, you know. And me and Mason are like, what the fuck was that? And Nate's still hitting the bowl behind us, and he goes, it was a bird. Apparently this giant bird was above us the whole time, and what it did was it flapped its wings down to fly straight up in the air to get off this branch. And the way the rock was carved, I guess the way the wind came down, it like kind of like just made this like sound like that. Sound really loud, like seriously, like a fucking fireball just went through the sky. It was so insane. It was so nuts. I've never heard anything like that, and you had to be in the right place at the right time to really hear it like that, to feel it too. And I look at Mason, I go, holy shit, I just got my animal experience. my intention. Like, I wanted some trippy animal experience. I'm like, that's it. And he's like, yeah, brother. And then we high five and lock fingers. And then we go into Om chants and all that. And then I start talking about like chants to Mason. I go, you know, you can get into these meditative chants. And I learned this like through Alan Watts. He has a good guide on meditation, and he talks about the different chants. Like, you can do a Om, and this is what I was explaining to Mason, and I go Om, Om, and I said you could do it with anything. People do it in spirituality, and when you chant like that, and I'm telling them, you can go into a meditative state. Like Muslims can do it with Allah. And if you do it loud and fast enough, it will put you in a chant. So it's like, Allah, 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 Allah. Like that. You could even do it with any religion, really. It's just whatever you feel, or spirituality. And this is by no means a religious channel. I'm just saying you can use whatever. For me, you know, the Om, it's deeper and lower. And then, like, Mason just starts doing it with me. And he goes, Om. And we start doing it at different intervals. And then I go, Om. Meanwhile, this is going on, you know, so it's like all of us are like, Om. 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 And we're just like zoning out. We are zoning out. And Nathan's in the back just moving the bowl around. And I go, hey, Nate, let me see that bowl real quick, if you don't mind. So I'm going up there, and like the cliff face, I'm like getting it real low, and then it had this like, so it's like real round, like this, right? But underneath, near the base of it, it's like cut out even deeper in, like shaped like this, real near the base, and it's real deep, big enough to put your head in. So I'm banging the bowl in there. And it's like, the way it's resonating, I'm like, oh my God. I go, Mason, come here. And Nate wanted to go further down to see if you could hear this bowl refracting further down. So we can barely see him. I go, Mason, come here, stick your fucking head in here. And we're banging it in there. And then he goes, oh, yeah, and our heads are like, we're on the ground like this, in this like cutout. And Mason's like, oh, yeah. And then like Nathan comes back up, and I hand him the bowl, and I go, start hitting it in here with us. And like there's all this leaves and shit, and we're like really in there. And there's something crawling in the leaves next to me. I didn't know if it was a frog or snake, but I'm like, fuck it, I don't care. No fear, man, whatever. So this is probably the most insane part of the trip right here, is like, you know, Nathan's still learning this bowl, and he's getting kind of aggressive at it, where it's like, he's like making, it just like sounds real harsh and shit. Hold on. Where he's like making all this like clanking, and I'm like, Nate, play it with love. Take your time. So he syncs it up. And then he's getting it real good, like this. And then me and Mason have our head in this rock, and Nate is putting this in that like cutout. And Mason's just letting go, and he's like, and we start syncing up with the bowl. So it's like this. I'm gonna try to sync up with it because this is really important. And me and Mason are alming to it, syncing up. And I start laughing, and Nate's laughing, but Mason's in it. And so I'm like, oh, no, let's not laugh. Keep going. And then Mason just starts chanting. He's like, oh, eh, oh, eh, oh. And I'm over here like, and then I start chanting too. I'm like, and it felt insane, like almost Native American, and we just had this experience with this giant, like, spirit bird, essentially, that made this fireball sound, and in the most gorgeous cutout. So we just let go, and we're like, it just like was coming out of nowhere, like almost like it was being channeled through me, through the earth, essentially. Like I just let go, and I didn't know what was going on. It was just like I let go, and this chanting and channeling is like almost like Native American spirits are just flowing through me. I know this sounds weird, but I just surrendered to it and just. Just like it's getting intense. Both of us, me and Mason, doing it. It's getting like lighter and lighter, and then we just stop, and we all look at each other, and I go, holy shit, you guys ever done that before? And Nathan's like, no, I've never done that before. And Mason's like, yeah, it's my first time. I go, holy shit, we all just went into this as virgins together? And then I slapped the rock, because it's kind of shaped like a vagina, to be honest, with the way it's cut out. It looks like a snatch. And we all just have our fucking heads in it, buried screaming in it. And I'm like, ah! And Nathan's like, that's crazy! That was a man! It's just like this primal, this fucking just absolute primal. And by the way, I was really getting into it as I was demonstrating. You probably could feel it. But to be on the ground, you know, just feeling good in nature, just like in just a whole nother level. It's like, oh my God, this is what the fuck I need in my life. That, whatever the fuck that was, I need more of that. And this group of men, one who I didn't meet until that day, just letting go. We let fucking loose in a primal way, and it was just so soothing to the soul. We're all excited, and you know, it's getting real dark. It's starting to get dark. So we're all hugging each other and shit. We're like, ah! And then I'm like, oh, hey, let's do this. So we're like, we all hold hands and shit. And then I have Nate's holding this, and then I start to play it to see if we can feel it. And Mason's like, you know, Nate's holding it, I'm holding this, and Nathan and I are holding Mason's hands, so we're like locked up. I'm like, let's see if we can feel this through our, like, if we can feel the energy going through. And Nathan doesn't know how to quite hold it right while I'm doing it, so I'm like, let me hold it. And I'm like, what hand do you want to use the mallet on? He goes, the right hand. So we switch positions, we're all holding hands. And then he just starts playing it in my hand, and I'm like counter rotating it. And that, like, I swear to fuck, like, as he was doing it, because we were like made a complete circle holding hands while somebody was playing this. Like, I'm holding the bowl. Nathan is spinning the mallet. And then, like, my eyes just start to roll back into my head. And I can just, like, this energy is, like, flowing up my arm into Mason. And then Nathan is getting it. And Mason, you know, I'm like... And Mason's like, holy shit, I can feel it. Because I just let loose for a hot minute. It was so intense. Like, almost like... it just... orgasmic in a lot of ways, but like this stimulus on the brain, not like like you're blowing a load, you know what I mean? Just like this stimulus in the brain. And Mason's like, oh my god, I can feel it going, like channeling through you. And then Nathan's like, I can feel it on my end. And we're just like hugging each other and shit. And that's when we like, that whole moment in that little area was like this bond, you know. I've never like really got into Native American style of chanting ever. And now like starting like all day I've been listening to like chants, and I'm like, this is amazing. And I'm like hugging them. I go, I think we're fucking Indians, boys. And I got my arms around both of their necks. I'm like, we're Indians, boys. You know, with the spirit animal. And then an airplane goes over, and I'm like, Sky Whale! And they're like, Sky Whale! So, we come up out of this thing, and, you know, it's getting darker, and then we're banging the bowls as we're walking, you know. I got the little one. The big one's going off. Nathan's hitting the big one. Mason's leading us out. And then there's this branch, and Mason just grabs on it and starts hanging upside down, letting loose. And then we put the bowl under his heads, and we're hitting him. And he's like this and shit. You know, we're coming down from our mushroom trip, but we're still feeling really good. And then all of a sudden, we're going through this path opens up, and we see this beautiful, beautiful doe. And she's looking at us. And she just looks at us like she knows us. Just looking at us. And then she turns around, because we're walking on the path, and she walks down the path in front of us, never looking back at us. And she keeps her ears back. Almost like she's guiding us out. Because we didn't know where the fuck we were. And then she goes off to the left. And then she goes in the meadow, and I'm like, she's not going to run from us. I can tell. I can feel it. And then we walk by her, and she's just really close, just looking at us. You could see it in her eyes. And it was almost at this point, I'm like, wow, she's guiding us out. Very motherly of her, just this motherly vibe from this beautiful doe. And we all wave at her, and we're like, bye! And she's just looking at us. Not the ounce of nervousness from her. Like, almost the Native Americans have channeled it. Their energy through these animals. Spirit bird. Mother doe. So we're going through the woods. Now it's starting to get real dark. And then Mason's like, oh shit, spider web. And I kid you not, the biggest spider, like the ass end of it was like that fucking big. I didn't know we had spiders that big in Texas, especially around here. And it was black as shit. It wasn't a black widow, but the front end of it was smaller, but the back end was huge. And it had that like print on it, like a face, like a skull almost, but it didn't quite look like a skull. And what they do is because I've been watching the spider in front of my place, is at night they'll set up an elaborate spider web and an open pathway to catch bugs at night, and then they deconstruct the web during the day. So these things were coming out at night, setting up these elaborate webs across the trail, but they were just high enough we could walk under it. And Mason and Nate were nervous about it. I go, no, they're setting them high enough because deer run down these trails all the time, and they would just be getting knocked over. These animals have evolved for so long that they're setting it high enough. And Nate wanted to keep using a flashlight, and Mason's like, no, let's, we can see in the dark. And then the way the moon was shining, you could see your shadow in the trails. Like, the moon was really lighting it up. So, these spiders were magnificent. And I'm, like, staring at it. I'm like, it's the queen of the night. So, there you go. I had another profound animal experience. And we kept seeing them on the trails. And Mason's like, I'm like, trust the trip, trust the unconscious mind. And he goes, trust. And we're walking down the trail, and we're like, and then Mason and I start running. I'm like, let's run. Hey, hey, we're just doing it. And then there was this area where we're running where we had to jump because it was starting to go down this steep hill. And Mason's like, jump, and we jump, and we're like, hey, we're doing this, jumping and just running and jumping, and hey, together, side by side, hey, running, jumping, hey, jump. And it was just like this state of flow state, essentially. And, then we get to this, like, open field with the moon. And we just go out there. And we just stare up at it for ages. Because they was trying to get out. Like, they was really considering leaving. And I'm like, hey, boys, if we're here to 3 in the morning, I don't give a fuck. I'm like, I'm down to just keep fucking cruising. So I'm like, you guys decide. So we're just, like, staring at and all the lightning bugs. Just so many lightning bugs. Just lightning bugs. Just everywhere. And this beautiful, like, gully meadow thing. And the moon, the night. We were there during the day. And we experienced different levels of dusk. And it seemed like time really slowed down. Just staring at the moon. The night has its own beauty with all the spiders and the shit that come out and the lightning bugs. It was just a different energy about it, which is beautiful. Now, a lot of the trip is more of the same of what I shared. They finally succumbed to technology to figure out how to get us out of there. Because we ended up in a neighborhood somewhere in a field. And I laid down in the grass because it felt good. And we played a few songs. And then Mason put on this one song that was real good. It had like this French female singing. It was beautiful. Or it was a French male. Either way, it had French and Spanish in it. It was so beautiful. And we were dancing. And then we finally start going back to the car. It was just the most amazing journey. And when we get back to the car, it's the only car in the parking lot. And it was in the middle of the parking lot. And we play a little bit of Frisbee. And then we went to Pete Terry's to get some burgers. I didn't eat. I was content. And then we went back to Nathan's place and we watched the movie True Grit till like 1:30 in the morning. And made a new friend. And really bonded with Mason. Made a new friend with Nathan. And it was, I think, these experiences of being with strangers and just human experiences. That's one of the key takeaways is like, fuck the finer shit in life. For me, it's about having human experiences with other people because that energy is crazy. And this is like one of the first times in a long time that I felt alive. We were just living. We went into the woods well-kept gentlemen and we came out savages because our shirts were off, we're all fucking dirty and shit. We went in with like a destination in mind and then we wandered aimlessly and trust the unconscious mind to guide us, and it was magnificently beautiful. The Frog Kingdom, the Spirit Bird, the Chanting, the Mother Doe, the Queen of the Night. The whole thing was beautiful. And there was a point at night when we were still in the woods and I go, guys, you know what I realized on this trip? This is the lesson. Everything I want is here, right now. And they're like, that's beautiful. It's just like, it's just like, it's not having specific things. It's not having a girlfriend. It's not having a mansion or a high-end car or any of that bullshit. For me, it's like, what I want is here, and I just had it. Some mushrooms, a backpack full of simple things, good company, and being in the woods with nowhere in mind to go. And the time went so slow. It was real living. We were living. Just absolutely living. And this chanting came out of nowhere. Like the earth was channeling it. Like Spirit Bird got it kicked off. I still like in shock from this because this was literally last night. But for me, it was profoundly beautiful. Because after the last Cult of episode, I did hit a real patch of depression there. Because coincidentally enough, one of you in the comments said, you know, you're not really big in the law of attraction stuff, but you could watch me even if it was bird watching. Well, after that episode, I went on this date with this girl, and I go, yeah, my cats have never got a bird, and I was telling her how, like, my cats bring in mice and lizards, but I'm like, they never got a bird. Well, the next day after that, they both got these baby birds. One died. The other one I tried to save, and I put it in a box up high. And it was living, and the mother bird kept coming back to it. And then one night there was a really hard rain, and I went to check on it, and it was dead. And I was sad, but for some reason, from that point forward, I started to hit this rocky path of, you know, I'm usually on the up and up and up. And it was just like a month or so, a month and a half of just like waning emotionally And I didn't know why I couldn't get out of the funk. And then I went to the NLP hypnotic training, and it's like, oh my God. And now that I think about it, Mason's intention was a reset. And I guess that's what this was. A paradigm shift. Conveying the story is going to be nothing like the actual experience itself, the journey. It was the lapse. There was so much I couldn't share. That is just a lot of information to cover, but you know, it was profoundly beautiful. It was real living. It was living. I was alive. I'm alive now. I was alive. That I'm alive. I am alive. That was real living. Living to the max. I don't think there's anything else I'd trade in for that. I wouldn't trade that in for anything. And I said, gentlemen, this is going to be a moment that we will remember 50 years later down the line, no matter where we end up in life. When we were on the trail at night, I'm like, you boys will remember this shit for the rest of your lives. And they're like, they agreed. And I just want to do it again for sure. But, you know, that's something you don't do all the time. You need to appreciate the scarcity of something of that caliber. And that was the most amazing psychedelic trip I've ever had in my fucking life. It was... I am just relishing in it right now, as you can probably tell. But this video is pretty long. I thought I'd share that with you. The magic of it. So, when's the next Cold of Cat episode? I don't know. But there will be another one. And until that happens, guys, I'll see you in the next one.